Hello and welcome to Negative Art Productions. I know it's been a while, and I wanted to come here today and Wait, let me back up. Before I get there, I am going to tell a story, and before I do, I was inspired by a few things. So, number one, I'm going to send this in to the Ghost Story Guys podcast, and you're going to hear this verbatim. So I will send in, might be kind of cool to hear if they read it on Talk Spooky to me, Brennan or Paul. Be cool to get Paul because Brennan read it last time. Just saying. So I'm going to send it in to them, and I'm going to read it word for word so you can hear from, how I tell the story. I think it'll be really cool if they do read it on Talk Spooky to me. If not, whatever. I'll send it in no matter what. Give the Ghost Story Guys a shout out because it's my favorite podcast and the reason I'm doing this. But before I get there, I did want to say, adjacent to the Ghost Story Guys is Mysteries and Monsters, which is hosted by, of course, Mr. Paul Bestel. So what I have here is, after listening to his podcast with John Russell, a psychic, you should go and listen to that. If you want to get my perspective on the paranormal, even things like how the government is what we think run like, it's in that podcast. You gotta go listen. I got chills. There was almost a few times where I started crying. I was tearing up just because of everything that John was saying and Paul matched up to my thoughts and feelings about the situation, as well as my educated assumptions. So go listen to that podcast. And I gotta say, this is the first time in my adult life since I have bought the Bruce Campbell autobiography that I have bought a book. And it is 20 Ways to Increase Your Psychic Abilities. And it was written by the guest, John Russell. He talks about it. Go listen to that. It's so cool. Now, I would like to tell a story. And the subject of the story is something I've always experienced, but just becoming more comfortable to share. Even if you'll notice from how I'm speaking from my last ghost stories, I was a little bit more tense and trying to be spooky all the time. But now, I want to normalize this a little bit more. And I think we should. So let me tell my favorite kind of story. A ghost story. The Prancing Gremlin. If you listen to my previous stories about the guy, you'll know that I grew up in White Bear Lake. It was down the street from the actual lake itself and was suburbs built in the 80s with large yards. Each yard was very long and always heavily wooded in the back. Nature surrounded you, and you could tell by the size of the trees, the vegetation, that the land felt very old. And I don't know if I've said this before, but my father's a history major, and he found an old map of where we lived, and it's supposedly supposed to be what was actually a beach for the indigenous people of White Bear Lake. So if you dig far enough, you can find sand and clay in my yard, which to me sounds like, yeah, over the years, it was the beach shore and then got farther and farther away and became residential areas in modern times, such as I described in the 80s. My neighborhood had an unsettling electric energy that was palpable. Even though it was beautiful, lush, and green, there was still a darker feel to the neighborhood than the other ones in town. I would notice, after I started seeing the guy, the one main entity, I would also notice other things. Being at a doctor's visit when I was a teenager, around when I was seeing these things, I noticed faraway objects were a blur. I had been seeing things that didn't make sense due to my vision being bad, so I got glasses. I would ignore what I was seeing, but still kind of think maybe it was something. I don't know. It was not out of the corner of your eye, but the best way to describe it, I guess, is if you didn't have glasses before, and then you get glasses. So I could start seeing more physically. I would assume the things that I was seeing could have been new tenants in the neighborhood across the street. There was a rental house, so you never really knew who everyone was you were seeing. Big yards, not the biggest neighborhood, but still, people were out. So I would notice, after I started seeing the one main entity, I would notice other things. And now that I had my glasses, I could see them a little bit more. So around dusk, I would see inconsistently in different front yards what I would think was a mailbox. Then it would hit me, why would a mailbox be in the middle of someone's yard? Mailboxes are at the edge, where your driveway, so didn't make sense. I would see a 3 to 4 foot tall, dark, thin object. It'd start from pretty far back, and then I'd get closer. It'd be about 30 feet away, and then I could start seeing a little bit more, making out more lines. It was a dark object, and it would start moving and changing shape, slightly to more creature-like. A very skinny body with arms and legs to match the human thin structure. As weird as this sounds, my eyes were now telling me what I was seeing was the evil gremlin from Gremlins 2. I know there's evil gremlins in Gremlins 1, but the main evil gremlin in Gremlins 2 is what I think of because of the way it was moving, or like a Dobby-like creature. I would always see this swaying type prancing movement, and I'm going to show you. Not, I don't care how stupid I just looked. That's the best way I can describe it. It was prancing, and it would never get closer to me or farther back, but it made itself seeable for me. And the closer I would get, the more intense, and the object would fade into darkness. There was almost an intelligence to it, disguising itself next to a mailbox at the end of a neighbor's yard. Then once I focused in, the shape would change to more of a skinny, short, black humanoid with really thin arms and legs. It was always just far enough to not see clearly. Then poof! It's almost like it knew I saw it, and it would disappear. To add a little bit more context to this, instead of me maybe just adjusting to my new glasses, for all you skeptics, I had a friend see it. One night, we were out, and he saw it too. I didn't want to give him any preconceived notions or ideas about what this was, so I let him tell me what he saw. He thought it was my neighbor staring at us from the front yard. Ooh, describe what you saw. And he told me, it's a neighbor kid, but really dark and dancing? The motion and mischievous presence was perceived childlike to my friend, but to me, it always felt more taunting and mean-spirited. Not evil or malevolent, but like fucking with you type of energy, right? We get closer, and of course, it disappeared. My friend was convinced and never assumed I was lying about seeing anything again. After a while, I stopped paying attention as there was never any resolution or end. When I had experiences with different entities or the guy, there was more intensity and it would typically come close to us. But with these, anytime I or someone with me would see it, would get near, it would disappear. Over the years as an adult, I would see them time to time from visiting my parents' house, staring across, looking at a small gremlin-like creature swaying and taunting me in the dark. Another thing to note in that almost all of these experiences, they were completely silent. But they had an energy that was loud, if that makes sense. Why I brought this up and why I discussed the Ghost Story Guys podcast and John Russell's book is because it's all kind of tying together my thoughts and feelings and being a little bit more in tune with things. And I do want to say, discussing this, it's a big topic in my family. I even talk about this with my son, who's 9, my daughter, who's 5. I don't try to make it scary or intense, but I'm just very matter of fact. And I was thinking, why haven't I seen something since the stories I've been discussing when I was a teenager, even up through my early 20s? And we'll get there on the timeline, but recently, I'm in my 30s. I haven't seen the guy. There have been experiences here that I will tell in separate stories in my house. Nothing terrible, but it's been a while since I've seen something as, what's the word I'm looking for? As present as the main entity. And my thought is that I am a father, a husband, and in that I am protective of my children and my wife So maybe I give off a protective, don't come near me, don't fuck with me aura. And that's why things are not letting themselves be visible to me or known. I don't know. That's just an idea. I think maybe the prancing gremlin could be an elemental. Not trying to put too fine a point on it and say, this is it, because I don't know. It's just ideas based off the most recent podcasts I've been listening to and other things. And it could be something as old as an elemental. It could be something newer that once people were around, they started messing with it. I don't want to go to Skinwalker, but it's hard to describe and it's hard to research, because if you type in evil gremlin, Dobby looking thing in dark, you're not going to get very good results. So tell me what you think. I'm going to ask the ghost story guys what they think. I've heard about these beings that they've seen or creatures where they're described as gremlin-like or Dobby-like, kind of messing with people, at least to the point of interacting with them directly. So tell me your thoughts. Please subscribe to my channel. Black Forest Ghost Stories is what this is associated with. I want to do these more often, and hopefully it won't be 2 months before my next one. But hey, I have a full-time job and I'm a parent, so I try. But I love if you watch this. Thank you so much. If this doesn't make it on Ghost Story Guys, that's cool. They've already read one of my stories. My dream has come true. They read The Guy.